Shut up and sit down.
So good afternoon once again. Good afternoon, everybody. And once again, welcome to another Demo Friday. As always, we record these sessions and they're going to later appear on the LSLP in session webinar series on YouTube. And today we have a very, very special session because we got someone who happens to be a good friend. I mean, again, literally a gentleman and a scholar, as we always like to say.
Oh, wow.
But someone who does that, who's doing really interesting work in our in the field of literacy studies and comics and Dr. Mike Dando. So I had a chance to. I mean, I think I met that Mike through people we know, people whose lives
we met online. It sounds
online,
weirder. We met through mutual friends.
Exactly. So
digitally and then in person. So
so in that sense, it's nice to have. And I invited Mike, kind of like as a continuation of a conversation we've had that we also did in his comic school podcast, but today bringing it to the class, to my methods and approaches class. So the topic for today and the conversation we're going to have, and again, we really want it to be a conversation where all of you feel comfortable enough to jump in at any moment, because that's what this whole thing is about. And the topic for today has to do with how to bring up ideas about popular culture in the English class. How we talk about popular culture. Sometimes, and just to introduce the topic, sometimes we, or as teachers, sometimes we fall prey to being dismissive of popular culture. So we're afraid to talk about it, or we don't think that's something worth bringing up. Sometimes it's just we don't know how to bring it up. We don't know how to approach it, because we feel like if we start talking about popular culture, what's going to happen is we're going to be so out of sync because we're going to bring references that fly over our students' heads, and then they bring references that fly over ours, and then But I think there is a place for pop culture, and it's a place in a way to turn it into or use it as a learning device. And I think that's where the conversation today is gonna go. So after this intro, I'm gonna leave my main man here, the Dandalorian, that room to talk and tell us what he's thinking. And then the rest of you, remember, you can use the chat, you can turn on your microphones, you can turn your webcam, and just jump in at any moment and be part of the conversation. So Mike, the floor is yours. And once I thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'm really glad to be here, and I'm glad that I'm just on the far side of having a cold, because my voice is going to sound really good on YouTube. So this timing worked out perfectly. Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Dando. I am an assistant professor of English and language arts education at St. Cloud State University in St. Cloud, Minnesota, which is in central Minnesota. So I'm in the middle of the United States, northern middle of the United States, or what's colloquially referred to as the Midwest of the United States. And I am an education researcher, and I specifically look at the intersections of popular culture and critical literacy development, critical multimodal literacy, and democratic engagement. So essentially what that is, excuse me, is the ways in which our students are engaging the word and the world through the shared medium that they engage in. Particularly, I look at some of the more popular cultures. I look at hip hop culture, and I look at comic books. Hip hop, and I've got the data. I won't bore everybody with charts and graphs, although I'm sure this is not a group that would be bored by charts and graphs, my fellow nerds out here. But pop culture is basically how the zeitgeist is constructed, what people are doing, how they're doing it, how they make sense of the world. And right now, globally, hip hop culture, which is established in the United States, is the most popular form of cultural conversation, artifacts, downloading albums, streaming albums, fashion, you name it. It is grounded in hip hop. It is the most popular cultural form in the world. The second thing that I will say is that comic books, even if you've not read a comic book, you likely are conversant in comic book culture. What do I mean by that? I mean, you likely know who Superman is, who Wonder Woman is. The most, if you're measuring these things economically through box office receipts, Spider-Man No Way Home is the most, it made all the money. It is the most popular film, period. It's the highest grossing film of all times. And so when we look at how our students are engaging with the world around them, this is sort of the terrain. Popular culture is the terrain through which our students are making sense of the world. And I think if we're going to, as language arts teachers, and we're all language, correct me if I'm wrong, we're language arts teachers, is that correct?
Well, I would probably call you second language teachers, but I mean, I generally don't.
We're all word nerds.
Yeah, and I mean the language arts, the language. I mean, in general, I think we're all English education. We're all
English education. There you go.
Yeah, we're all traded in the language. So
okay.
Whether it's our native language or our second language, I think at some point that becomes that. I mean, especially when you move, and I would argue that when you move into the pop culture, when you move into the realms of comics and social media, and when you move into these digital spaces and onto these conversations,
that's right.
It stops being an issue. It's your first or your second language. Is the language in which the content is produced.
That's right. And I will, and I think this is a really important point to make. I tend to think of hip hop as the lingua franca of the world. Like it's the global shared language. So, for example, if I am a b-boy, so I guess let me go through what do I mean by hip hop. So hip hop culture is not solely rap music. It is actually a variety of artistic and multimodal practices. There's rap. There's also DJing or beat making. There's graffiti writing. Like this. There is breakdancing, which is often called b-boying, b-girling. And then there is something called knowledge of self, which is basically the capacity for critical thought and critical reflection. So that is not language dependent. And what I mean by that is, even if I do not speak a particular language, if I'm hearing someone, and I've heard rap in Portuguese, in, oh gosh, almost just so many varieties, so many languages, Afrikaans, Spanish, German, across the board. And I may not speak those languages, but I understand it's still communicating. I've seen folks transliterate through dance, through b-boy cipher. So they don't speak the language, but they're able to share practices. They're able to share certain forms of literacy, kinesthetic movement. They're able to share cultural practices through hip hop dance. And I've seen the same thing in comics, where I've seen comics in Spanish, in German, in English. I know many of my friends for whom English is their third, fourth language have said, well, one of the ways I've learned to read and write and process the English language was through comic books. And so that's where I spend a lot of my time, is investigating how students make sense of the world. So I work with the research that I'm doing works with what we would call adolescents. So between 13 and 18. And I work with them in a variety of ways. One of the things that I work with students doing is creating, you can kind of see behind me, creating hip hop music in language, in English or language settings. And yes, please do. My voice is, my voice is hanging in there, but please do feel free to give me a break by asking me any questions that you have. So I work with students in conceptualizing, creating, writing, recording, and producing hip hop art. So making beats, doing graffiti, writing rap, writing rhymes, and then performing them around issues of social justice. So what are the assets in their community? What are the things they bring to the table? I often talk about communities as cookouts. You bring something to the table. You bring something that makes the place better. You made it. It's from your call. You made it. It's from you, and you're bringing it to the wider world. So what are your assets that you're bringing, rather than have a deficit model of education? What are your assets? What are you bringing to the table culturally? What do you bring to the table? Your cultures of origin, your repertoires of practice, those types of things. And then how do those assets improve on the assets of your community, right? So what does your community do well? What is amazing about your community? And that's not to say that there's not challenges, but how does who you are and what your community does well, how does that work to address challenges such as some of the things that have come up, climate change, right? Issues of economic justice, issues of housing insecurity, issues of food insecurity, issues of incarceration, the carceral state, and talking about those types of issues of social justice, police brutality. Along those lines, kids are thinking about these things and they're making sense of it through hip hop. They're making sense of it through things like comics. I'm working on right now a project that is specifically looking at sci-fi, particularly Afrofuturist and speculative fiction through comic books, where students are engaging in radical forms of imagination, speculative thinking. What does the future look like? What do I want the future to look like? What do I dream the future to be? And what is my place in it? What is our place in it? Not do we have a place in it, but what does that look like from a cultural standpoint? What does that look like from a political standpoint? What does that look like from a personal standpoint, from my family, from my community? And then expressing that through visual medium. And we're doing that with a comic called Lion Man. Lion Man was originally conceived in 1947 by African-American authors, written, produced, and published by a completely African-American editorial and artistic board. And they put out a comic, and then they were not, the paper company would not sell them paper to print their comic because they didn't want to sell to African Americans. And so that character passed into public domain, and which means the copyright lapsed on it. And then anyone could use that character to tell a story. And we contacted the family of the creator of Lion Man and said, hey, we would like to bring Lion Man to these students and have that be an anchor text for students to think about their world and their life. And they said yes. And I got together with a gentleman, his name is John Jennings. He is an Eisner Award winning, Hugo Award winning, Bram Stoker Award, all the award winning. He's got a book coming out from Marvel called My Superhero is Black with Angelique Roche. You can pick that up wherever books are sold. And we worked together with an artist, another award winning artist named David Brame. And we told a story about rediscovering your identity. And what does it mean to step into yourself? What does it mean to claim your background, your past, your present, and future? We call it the Sankofa-ration. So Sankofa is a phrase, an African phrase that says, roughly translated, go back and get it. Those things that were taken from you, those things that have been left behind, it is essential to go back and get it. It's a command. Take your past, inform your present, build your future. So we can see that in folks like George Clinton and Parliament, who is like, they have a spaceship and they're going, Black people in space. This planet, super whack. Well, if this planet is super whack because living here is really tough, well, what else is there? Well, there's outer space. We can do anything we want in outer space. That's a liberatory practice. So when you begin to envision those liberatory practices, you begin, when you can dream better, and this is what Robert D.G. Kelly talks about, the radical Black imagination. When you can dream better, you can build better. You can design better. You must be able to dream in order to build a future. You have to, and you can't worry about whether it's practical. Harriet Tubman didn't worry about things being practical. She just knew what she wanted to do and knew why she needed to do it and did what she needed to do to help get there, to help everybody get there. Frederick Douglass didn't do what was practical. Okay, so we're not worried about practical, we're worried about possible. And when you restrict possibility to a certain aesthetic form, to certain forms of cultural practice, when you restrict that possibility, when you restrict the capacity to dream, you are restricting and foreclosing possibility. You are restricting and closing futures. So when we make our students assimilate in certain ways. Now we want our students to be literate. Frederick Douglass said, you're not free until you, I'm paraphrasing, you're not free until you can read and write. It's Bob Marley said it too, in case you're like, I don't know Frederick Douglass. That you should definitely read Frederick Douglass. But if you've heard Bob Marley, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. That's the same energy as they say, right? So you can't get free until you can imagine what free looks like. And that's kind of our goal. My coffee kicked in. Good morning. Do you know? So I was like, oh, I'm awake now. Okay, now we're cooking. But we can't. Our job is to collaborate. Our job is to be co-conspirators towards liberation, right? So how do we do that? Well, we do want to give, I want to give shouts out to folks like Lisa Delpit, who talks about, like, you got to know codes of power. Like, you have to understand the different registers, but you also have to understand kind of what Gramsci's talking about when he's talking about leveraging common sense. The cultural sphere, that's where it happens. Okay. So, and we're seeing this in places. So in education, we're talking about, in the United States, we're talking about banning books. Well, common sense says, well, of course you don't want kids reading naughty books. Okay, define who's defining naughty, who's determining when you're canceling, when you are banning books like Mouse. That's a graphic novel. You're banning Mouse because there's no words. Well, who gets to determine that? And what are you actually doing? What is the actual terrain? The terrain is, it's not about no words. It's about how that book is pushing against the status quo, how that book is opening paths towards liberation, opening paths towards resistance, opening paths towards democracy, small d, democratic practices, small d. And so that's where I spend a lot of my time, in comics and hip hop. So when we're talking about, when Kendrick says we're going to be all right, what does that mean? When he talks about I am, what does that mean? For whom, right? Freedom for whom, right? When we look at Pulitzer Prize winner, might I add, Ta-Nehisi Coates, for example, starts off as a hip hop journalist. Hip hop and comics are integrally related. That word was tough for me. I'm not quite that awake. They're integrated into what our practices as English, or as word nerds, as I call us. Like, we traffic in communication, verbal, written, oral, visual, multimodal. Right now is multimodal communication. Look at, like, I'm visually communicating stuff to you. Yes, I'm visually communicating that I got a lot going on, right? But also, this is habitus right here. This is habitus. This is Bourdieu all day. You know what I'm talking about? These are verbal practices, linguistic practices, written practices, those types of things matter. And our students are taking that up. So if we're talking about, so for instance, if we're talking about culturally relevant pedagogies and culturally sustaining pedagogies, we talk a good game about where our students are at, meet the students where they are. That doesn't just mean in the same classroom, right? That's not just a geographic, we are sharing the same space. Okay, neat. But if, as Gloria Ladson-Billings talks about, you're engaged in academic excellence, but you're also engaged in cultural competence or cultural attunement. That does not, cultural attunement, being culturally conversant does not mean engaging in the same practices in the same ways. It just means knowing what your students are talking about. Do you know what I mean? Like, you should not come in and be like, yo, everybody, what's going on? It's time for a Hot 16. My name is Mike Dando, and I'm here to say I love English language arts in a major way. You will not win. That is a losing strategy. I made somebody so mad they turned on their camera to show their disapproval. They turned it off. Don't do that. But you also have to understand that rap music is the way students are conversing with each other. And if you are saying, don't bring those practices into my classroom. Well, first of all, it's not your classroom. It's y'all's classroom. It's a community classroom. But you're saying leave those practices at the door. Then you're saying your ways of thinking, knowing, and being, your epistemological, ontological understandings of the universe have no place here. Well, if that's true, then who's due? Then who does? Right? Somebody else's. Nature abhors a vacuum. So if you're saying you leave your stuff out there, were you E.D. Hirsch? That's a deep cut.
Ooh, that hurt. Ouch.
Right? Like, E.D. Hirsch talks about, like, no, and this is all about, some of this is intention, right? Is E.D. Hirsch talks about, like, things every child needs to know. Well, hold on. Says who? Right? Says who? Says you. Well, says college. All right, who made that? Who made that? That's what we're talking about with popular culture. I tell this all the time. Shakespeare used to be illegal. Now it's mandatory. Right? As an English major in my college, if you're going to get through with your fancy piece of paper, you got to take a whole Shakespeare class. Used to be that you couldn't perform any Shakespeare play. That changed. That's popular culture. You know what I mean? And it's high culture, low culture. So sorry, go ahead.
No. Just to clarify,
that's my monologue. I'm about.
Not the monologue. So. It's just I wanted to clarify to students in a little bit of context, because you brought up Hirsch and started here cringing because we do. Edith Hirsch is a literacy scholar that basically, just to put it, I mean, it's
that's very diplomatic of you. No, you're right.
Let me finish my thought. I'll tell you what.
I welcome your angry emails. Sorry,
no. I'm just saying that just to put it in terms, for example, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, he's basically the closest thing we have to Thanos.
Yeah, that's hot. I love that. I love that.
There you go.
I love that. I'm banging the table. I love it.
And if he's listening, if he ever listens to this, I'm sticking to this.
No, dude, that's hot.
So
that's hot.
His most famous work, I mean, he has a couple of works on reading comprehension. And I mean, most those of us who specialize in literacy studies, we have inevitably to go down to the Ninth Circle of Hell, where his books are found, because well, we need to justify that we know literacy. And knowing literacy sometimes is going down to the Ninth Circle of Hell and figuring out what's going on.
Right.
With no Virgil to help you get you
right,
out
exactly. Of it. Right. It's just you.
So,
the
book that Mike is referencing is called Cultural Literacy: What Every American Should Know, or what American needs to know. I forgot the
needs to know. Yeah, needs to know. Not should. It's an imperative. Yeah.
You're right. Needs to know, and it's basically a grocery list of terms, places, cities, books, movies, songs. It's just a long.
It is this white.
List. Yeah. Oh yeah.
It is this white.
That too. So
sorry.
So when we talk about that, it's just that, and I was gonna just go into this as part of the conversation, that sometimes teachers can be reluctant to talk about pop culture because then they've been questioning. Then when do we talk about the important stuff? I mean, and that's not that they go like that. The important stuff, or when we talk about the literature, when we read the literature, when we who said it has to be either or?
Mm-hmm.
No one is saying that if you're going to be teaching the canon, that teaching or using comics means that you have to completely dismiss the canon. Nobody said that. Not even people who actually have looked at the. I mean, I'm thinking about Harold Bloom in particular. Bloom never said, "Oh, that doesn't mean you have to dismiss everything else." It means that there is a place for it, that you need to put it in relation to the entire structure.
Yes.
But I think that's one of the big questions is that, and I think one of the young teachers says, but yeah, we have a curriculum to comply with.
That's right.
We were just talking about this week about lesson planning. So it's interesting. So very apropos, we're talking about lesson planning in this particular section of the course. How do I find that middle ground?
Right. Well, I would say there's a couple of things. I would recommend just from a scholarly standpoint. There's a wonderful historian who unfortunately has just passed. His name is James Loewen, Loewen, and he wrote an amazing book called "Lies My Teacher Told Me." And he's a social studies teacher. He's a history teacher, and he did a lot of really amazing work on things like issues like sundown towns, and he was mapping across the United States towns who said if you were African American, Black, or Latino, or not white, you had to leave the town by the time the sun went down, and that was a thing in the United States. And he mapped all that. But one of the things he holds in Lies My Teacher Told Me is that history, and I argue popular culture writ large, is devalued because of its value. So power structures devalue it. So they say, well, history is boring. Yeah, because it's made to seem boring. History is not boring. It's made to seem boring because the people who make the decisions know how powerful it is. And when you can culturally get it agreed upon, they're like, oh, I don't do history. I don't read. I don't write. Right? That's a political move. That's to say, it's like that Big Brother move when you say, I'll trade you 2 pennies for 1 dime. Right? Not that I would have ever done that when I was an older brother. Apologies to my younger brother. Right? Because 2 is more than 1. When you misunderstand the thing, and when you don't understand the value of what you have, of your own practices, of your own background, of your own life, then it's easier to separate politically, and then I can distance myself. I can have people put distance to what their practices are and what real practices are. Well, what's real reading? Well, real reading is this. This is valuable. comics are a way to get kids to read real books. Comics are real books. Comics are real literature. Hip hop and comics engage in deeply complex and complicated literacy, cognitive practices. I was just reading a study yesterday because I'm a nerd. There was a soprano named Renee Fleming, and they were she's a very famous opera singer. They were brain scientists were scanning her brain, and they said, okay, we're going to scan your brain. You start singing. That's what you do for a living. You start singing. We want to see what parts of the brain light up. And I'm not going to sing because I don't want to do that to you all people, but just imagine a very good opera singer. She, it said, okay, now imagine you're singing. Don't sing. Imagine you're singing. And she said, I thought the parts of my brain would light up more when I was actually singing, but the parts of my brain that lit up the most was when I was imagining singing, because I was accessing bunch of different parts of my brain. So when we talk about product, that's a very narrow thing. You use those practices, right? Those practices of curiosity, those imaginative practices are actually therapeutic. So when we say what's the middle ground, it's not a middle ground. It's saying, I'm not saying don't read Shakespeare. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, what does Shakespeare afford us? And how, not just watching the movie with baby Leonardo DiCaprio, but to engage in transmedia practices, transliteracy practices, to say okay, how is the book different from the movie, but how are these two texts doing different things? That's a complex cognitive practice, right? When we engage in I'll just keep using Shakespeare. That's a different language. Those are different linguistic practices. When we think about iambic pentameter, we're working with students to speak a different language. The same thing is true in math. That's math literacy. So we're talking about literacy practices. Yeah, see? Boom. So it's not just measuring whether students know it's understanding what that is for. So that when we look at how language is used, how Shakespeare is using language in this, how's Eric B. and Rakim using syllables in those are similar practices, right? Nowadays, everybody talk like they got something to say, but nothing comes out when they move their lips, just a bunch of gibberish, right? That's Eminem. That's right. So I'm not talking about scansion necessarily. I'm talking about validating those poetic practices, but then also situating them culturally. So it's not an either or, dude, especially if you're teaching English as a second language, right? Or third or fourth or fifth or 19th. My favorite language, you ready? Joke time. My favorite language joke. This is going to be on YouTube. Hi, YouTube. What do you call someone who speaks 3 languages? Multilingual. What do you call somebody who speaks 2 languages? Bilingual. What do you call someone who speaks 1 language? American.
Well, you just win the internet for today, Mike Dando.
But that's the thing is we're limiting linguistic practice, we're limiting culture practices, we're limiting these things, and we're limiting our students. When we say, well, we're going to use Spider-Man to teach about reading, are you not going to use Spider-Man to teach about the social contract? With great power must also come great responsibility. And how does that show up in other places? How does that show up in Plato? Not the Delightful Children's Putty, the T.O., the philosopher. If we're just going to keep it West, right? So when we look at with great power must come great responsibility, how does that play into Descartes? I think, therefore I am. Okay, that's very individualistic. In West African culture, I am because we are, Ubuntu. Well, those are practices. With great power must great responsibility to who? Peter Parker not trying to be selfish. Miles Morales not trying to be selfish. But what does it mean not to be selfish? And what does that look like culturally? To what do we owe each other? That's a huge question that a 5th grader will take up. So that's what you're doing. So Sorry, let's leave room for questions. I'm not going to talk all day. Let's leave room for
no, I know. I want to just make one remark, and then hopefully people will start jumping in. But
please jump in.
There's an interesting thing when we think about, and recently I was having a conversation with a couple of colleagues, and we kind of brought up Rosenblatt. We don't probably do who is Rosenblatt here, in the sense of Rosenblatt. I mean, that as in the case of Rosenblatt, as much as I like the notion of real response theory about the potential it has to connect to your life, right? I'm also hypercritical of how in her work she always talked about, high literature and trashy literature.
Yeah.
I mean, and for me that was problematic because then sometimes teachers. Even with Shakespeare. So it's interesting how we have this idea that, we can read Shakespeare, but then how about we can say, but maybe we can use 10 things I hate about you as an entry point.
Right.
But in its own sense that, this is the entry point. And I heard people even in lectures and in conferences saying that comics is a very cute gateway to the real literature, and I'm
that makes me want to throw a chair. I haven't yet.
Yeah, because we're not Bobby Knight. We're not Bobby Knight.
Yeah, I'm not Bobby Knight, right? I would never.
By the way, I think a lot of people watching this are gonna probably lose on that one. So let's move on.
Go ahead, pause the YouTube video, go look up some video, and then come back.
Exactly.
Welcome back.
So. But it's interesting what we can think, and I'm thinking specifically when I think Shakespeare, I always think about two movies that I think are really nice examples of how to play it out. And one is 10 Things I Hate About You, which for people who haven't seen it or people who haven't really realized, it's a movie from the late 90s or early aughts. And he had Heath Ledger, one people didn't know before he became the Joker. And he's the protagonist. And the movie's inspired. Or it's an adaptation of The Taming of the Shrew.
That's right.
And through the movie, they throw you a lot of Easter eggs. And I mean, if you watch the movie carefully, there are a lot of Easter eggs about that this is Shakespeare.
That's right.
Some are very overt and some are a little more covert.
That's right.
And then there's a second one I've always really liked watching and talking about it and using it. It's Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet.
Right.
Because it's kind of like, I used to like that one because it always goes back, and I remember even writing essays in college about the timelessness of Shakespeare's plays, and it's like that. William Shakespeare is timeless, and then but when people move away from the tights, and the performance in the tights, then we start everybody starts clutching their pearls,
right?
But if you look, for example, at that movie, the way they kind of take the original language and they impose it on a 1990s backdrop. So it's not Verona, but Verona Beach. And they have, and they still have swords. They still have daggers. They still have long swords.
We thought we were the absolute coolest.
It's just that they're guns. But the guns, it's like the guns is like a rifle. an assault rifle is called a long. The brand they just use sword, dagger, and longsword. As the brand name. So the rifles the rifles are called a longsword. Like
that's right.
Kind of like, and then Mercutio has a dagger, and the dagger is this Nazi gun. So, but it kind of works in the sense that the dialogue is the dialogue from the play. So it's not the adapted dialogue.
Right.
And there are things you can do, again, from the transmedia and the transliteracy movement, where you can go back and forth between the book and the movie.
Right.
Why don't we do this kind of analysis as opposed to saying, the movie is just an entry point?
Right.
No, it's not. There's no entry point.
I got a couple of thoughts, and then please type up your questions and then put them in, because I think you're absolutely right. And I wanted to say a couple of things because you made me think about pumpkin pants. So let me say this. A lot of folks are hesitant because they feel culturally separated from their students. Right? They're culturally separated from their students. They're like, I don't know that. So rather than learn that, they say, I'm going to go with what I know. Right? And they say, well, that turns out like, well, I'm not hip hop. I don't know about hip hop culture. You don't. I don't speak. I don't talk like that. I don't dress like that. You don't talk like Shakespeare either. You don't talk like pumpkin. You don't wear pumpkin pants, but you figure it out, and you're making your students try and figure it out too. So you got to try and not think about it as a gap, but think about it as, and again, this is what Gloria Latzenbillies calls it, like this education debt. You've got some, you got some things that you owe to people. You got to do some homework. You got to ask students what you need to know and then be willing to learn, right? And so that's kind of what I think, because Henry Jenkins talks about translanguaging, transmedia practices. So it's not 10 Things I Hate About You is a great way to learn about Shakespeare. 10 Things I Hate About You is a great film on its own merits. Now, like Clueless is great. Clueless is Emma. Clueless is not great because it's Emma. Clueless is great because it's funny and Paul Rudd doesn't get older. So we got to validate it on its own terms, right? So when I go and like my kids, I teach a pop culture class. My students are freaking out about this new Batman. Yo, that dude, and I love him. I love the actor Robert Pattinson. Is the dude from Twilight for me? Actually, not even. He's Cedric Diggory for me. So you're gonna tell me Cedric Diggory is Batman? Cedric Diggory got mopped by Voldemort. Okay.
I'm just cringing here because I'm not allowed to make Twilight jokes anymore.
No, but what I'm saying is but what I'm saying is we have cultural reference that our students do not have. Man, I'm hyped about this Batman movie. This is gonna be amazing. I can't wait. But our students are engaging in these practices. We have to be willing to stand. We have to be able to collaborate. Our students don't need saviors. They need partners. We got to be able to deconstruct the power dynamics in the classroom. And that's what pop culture does. When you say your culture matters, you're making sense of the world. You're not empowering your students. They've already got the power. You are acknowledging the power differential, and you're taking steps to correct that imbalance. Do you know what I'm saying? You don't empower students. But what you're saying is you bring your assets in because you have agency, you have brilliance, you have genius. Bring that into the classroom and let's compare it with, yeah, I read a lot of Shakespeare, but you've listened to a lot. You listen to a lot, I don't know, 21 Savage. You listen to a lot of Nicki Minaj. Okay. That's a type of literacy. Let's figure out what those literacies can do with each other. So that's
before we go to the questions, this is the part where I'm really starting to think that, and I can't believe I'm about to say this. But it seems that at some level, Vanilla Ice was right all along. We have to stop, collaborate, and listen.
He's out of pocket. What's that meme? He's out of line, but he's not wrong. But it's this idea of what does that mean for those are democratic practices. Now I hate that you took me here, but I think it's at least a good bit. Those are 3 essential democratic practices. So if you're thinking about like, what do I have to do in order to gauge pop culture? First, you have to stop what you're doing, and you have to cease practice as usual. Now, I think where Rob Winkle got it wrong of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2: Secret of the Ooze fame, Go Ninja Go. You have to stop. You have to listen and collaborate. So it's quibbling, but you have to stop what you're doing. You have to dismantle hegemonic practices in your classroom. You have to listen. That means you have to attend to the real wants, needs, desires of your students, and you have to believe. Sarah Lawrence Lightfoot says one of the most tragic things is when a teacher does not see the future in their students. Right. So you have to listen to and you have to believe in their potential, their capacities, their genius and their brilliance. And then you collaborate. Then you co-construct, you engage in co-generative dialogues, as Chris Emdin says. So yeah, no, Walter, you're not wrong. In one of my favorite movies, The Big Lebowski, I don't like that we have to talk about Vanilla Ice right now, but those are 3 principles and practices that I think are really important for getting. I think you just made a new talk for me. that's going to get me booed out of the room, but then also make people think. And that's what you want as a scholar.
If you bring the dude, but if you bring the dude into the conversation,
so
you're leveling things up a
so
little bit.
What questions do you have for me after I've now gone on the
monologue? Let's hear from. Of course, we have Tatiana, who's a professor in our program,
hello.
She's been a mentee of mine for a while, but she's also a colleague now, and we have some of the students. So, Tatiana, if you want to jump in the conversation, and then we'll give the students some time to think about questions. And I know you have questions. You ask very good questions. So, Tati, if you want to jump in the conversation, because I know there are things that Mike and I were talking about that resonate with the things you do.
I saw the heart emoji a couple of times. And by the way, I dropped my email in the chat. Feel free to reach out anytime. If you think about a question later today, feel free to drop me a line. Like I said, it's only 8:20 where I am. So you do you.
Fair enough.
No, first of all, Michael, thanks a lot, because everything that you started talking about culture, including culture, not only pop culture within our classrooms, is basically what I'm trying as well with my students, right, with the ones that are here. And all along what I've been doing these years with culturally responsive pedagogy in the classrooms, and telling students, listen, do we have something called Colombian culture? Can we have just one culture? We have, lots of things to talk about. We do not speak only Spanish. We have lots of indigenous languages. We are blind, not listening to that. We are following that colonialistic way of thinking still yet. And we're trying to, dismantle that. so that those three things that, of course, you mentioned about vanilla, but stop listening and collaboration. It's it's one of the things that I ringed lots of bells with what we are trying to do nowadays, especially trying to focus on not thinking English as something that we need to learn because we need to be more competitive in the world, but also because we can use English as an excuse to talk about our own context. And we have to show what we have, not only in Colombia, of course, we're talking about South America itself. So thanks, Tons.
Yeah, I think that's super important, in that when we think about what does it mean to be, so for instance, educated, what does it mean to be literate? How are you culturally situating that? What is the importance of, as you said, indigenous populations, those forms of funds of knowledge, those forms of practice, those life ways. When we talk about culturally sustaining pedagogies, which is, Samuel Lim and Django Paris and a bunch of other scholars too. When we take that seriously, what does it mean when we say decolonize your syllabus? Okay, well, let's take that seriously. It doesn't just mean bring in a Maya Angelou poem or a Toni Morrison short story, although I would, because it's genius, brilliant writing, but that's not culturally sustaining because you haven't rethought your practices. You haven't rethought, as what you said, like, what does it mean? We don't need to learn English, but what does it provide us when we do? What opportunities does that open up for us? When we think about as you said, Colombian practice, what does that mean? Well, it's not a monolith any more than Americanness or being a member of any historically othered community, right? That has been subject to violence and oppression, as it were. Like, these things matter. Those aren't monoliths. Colombian hip hop practice, dance, for example, b-boy, so for instance, Brazilian hip hop looks so different from hip hop that you see in Spain, or you'll see in Australia, all those places, because they're culturally situated, because they're not, it's not a monolith. So it's not like everyone in Australia knows how to break dance. That's a specific cultural practice, right?
Especially
If that makes sense, like it's
Yeah,
not
it
monolithic,
makes.
and right? Okay.
a lot. And especially because going back to to literature and what we mean by literature, and thinking in authors that we had in the past, of course, in South American literature. Nowadays, we have lots of authors that we call pop culture authors. Yes, in terms of that talk and describe our cities, our countries. And there's someone, I'm not going to say who, because there's an academy who thinks that we can say something that it is literature and something that it's not literature, right? Going back to what Shakespeare, right? So the ones that we can call authors and the ones that we cannot call authors. So again, it's yes, it's unbelievable that the 21st century will still fighting with who has the right to say that.
Right. Well, and it's so interesting because who has the right to say often is an issue of power. And for me, that is often the missing letter to the puzzle. That's a missing letter to the wordle, as it were, the concept. Because Charles Dickens is to Tom Clancy, but just in Elizabeth, like he's just churning out stuff. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle I love detective fiction. Might I mention that the new Batman movie is coming out and I'm very excited. I love detective fiction. But to say like Arthur Conan Doyle wasn't John Grisham, right? Like, and that's due respect to everybody, because I love a good courtroom drama too. Okay. I watch all 20 seasons of Law and Order, or 40 seasons, or however long it is. But to have this, there's not a bifurcation of high culture, low culture. What you're doing is you are tacitly referencing hegemonic and political and cultural power structures. That's it.
Yeah. One thing when we talk about popular culture, I think it's, and I want to bring it up, it's the even in the way we talk, and I think this is like kind of the lesson for some of the students and for some of the let's say the grad students or the young scholars listening to this, that right now there is a bunch of us academics who are reclaiming this space where our epistemology is not simply the scholarly part, but it's also like, I was actually thinking back to my own website, and I said, and because I have a list of what I call my sources of inspiration. So, and I say I draw from a long line of thinkers, theorists, and researchers from fields like literacy, sociocultural theories, and critical theory. I also draw inspiration for real and fictional popular culture icons, as I usually call them in class, postmodern philosophers. So in my philosophy of life, I mentioned scholars like Pierre Bourdieu, Paulo Freire, Peter McLaren, Arlette Willis, Bell Hooks, but I also mentioned James Brown, Batman, Green Lantern, James Hetfield.
That's it.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Bruce Lee, Tommy Smith, John Carlos. I'm like,
let's go.
Like there are people, we know people. And you mentioned, for example, you mentioned Chris Emdin, and here listens to this. Big shout out to Chris. I mean, he's doing amazing work. But there are people who, I know people in hip hop and who are both using the working ideas from like W.E.B. Du Bois.
Yep.
And Tupac Shakur.
Hey, that's me.
It's like yeah, when you talk, or for example, when you're talking about issues about miseducation.
That's right.
At the same time, they talk about Carter Woodson's The Miseducation of the Negro, and they bring up Lauryn Hill. And like, no, because it's, even we as scholars, we're not monolithic in the sense that all we do is cite. No, there are theories that we play with. And I have a long list. I already mentioned some of them. And sure, I mean, Paulo Freire has a lot, but the Principal Spider-Man, or even the whole notion of even I mean, you know this, I'm a huge, I mean, as much as I love Batman, Green Lantern is my man.
I mean, nobody's perfect. That's fine. Nobody's perfect.
Dude, don't even go there.
We don't have that. We don't have that kind of time.
I'm just gonna say no, but what I like,
that's another topic.
Green Lantern is the importance of will, and I think that when you think about the Green Lantern, the notion of the Green Lantern, and the idea that the power of the Green Lantern is they can build anything they want with the ring as long as they have enough will to think about it and pull it off. Like a Green Lantern they can build anything as long as they have enough imagination and they really have the guts, they really have the, as Jaime Escalante would say, the ganas to do it. So
two things real quick, because I don't want to lose this and I want this to be recorded. Okay. Yo, think about, and I'm just going to turn my camera here. So you see right here, I got the Green Lantern poster. And you see right back here, I got the signed Neil Adams Green Lantern. That's John Stewart. So if we think about the capacity, because not only do you have to have the will, this is one of the things I actually do like about Green Lantern. I like Hal Jordan. It's fine. But you have to have not only the will, but the capacity to imagine. And Hal Jordan's a pilot. He's brilliant and he's fine. John Stewart is a Black man living in America who has served in the military, but is also an architect. He could build with his mind. He has the will and he can build his mind, and he will fundamentally have a different ontological and epistemological understanding of the world. And so his imagination is going to be different. The things that he makes, the will that he has, comes from a different source, even though it's powered by the same battery. We need to write that paper. Oh my God!
Write paper. All right. Do I have to be in the Green Lantern thing? Sure. I've always had a sweet tooth for Hal Jordan, but more recently I've become a Jessica Cruz.
Yes. Yo, Boz. Yo, no. Okay. This is an offline conversation because we got Simon Boz. We got Jessica Cruz. Oh, y'all but here's the thing. And watch what we just happened there is we took a pop culture referent, a framework, and the culture, the funds of knowledge. So it's not, Hal Jordan is not just the only Green Lantern. There's multiple Green Lanterns. There's even a ginger one. He's very cranky. Guy Gardner. There's one that looks like there's like a chipmunk one, but that's not kind of what we're talking about. We're using that as a way to think about post-humanism. We're about humanism. We're using that to think about issues of power and gender and class and race. This is a springboard intellectually and scholarly. And when we talk about listening, we talk about collaboration. This is what scholarship is supposed to do. It's supposed to afford us avenues for inquiry and for bringing up relevant questions to the human condition. And yeah, it's going to have laser rings and all kind of outer space stuff, but fundamentally, we're talking about matters of hugely of huge political, social, cultural import. So it's fun, but it's serious. A lot of people don't bring pop culture into their classroom because they don't want scholarship to hurt it, because they love it so much.
But at the same time, there are scholars actually going there.
Right.
Like.
So, but what I'm saying is that paradigm is changing, and we are in the process of changing it. So at AERA, raise your hand if you're going to be the discussant for a panel on comics, and that you organize the panel on comics about about sci-fi, comics, education. Else. That's going to be a bop. 5 years ago, that wouldn't have been accepted.
That would never have happened.
Wednesday, if you're interested, I can send the link. I have a book. I have a chapter in a book coming out. Danny Friedrich and Deidre Holman up at Teachers College put together an amazing collection called Pop Culture Curriculum Assemble. I did a piece on how we conceive of teaching conceive of teaching and learning in the popular culture through comics. I look particularly at Professor X, Stick, and Wakanda. So 3 different ways of thinking about teaching, what it means historically. It's on Zoom. It's next Wednesday. And I'm at I'm going to be presenting at South by Southwest EDU Festival on comics, hip hop, and education. The paradigm is changing because we are the nerds kind of understand the power of culture, the power and the potential that our children have. We were once kids. We grew up on hip hop. We grew up on comics. We know what it do. So let's bring that into our classroom. Let's figure that out. What questions do you have?
Yeah,
I know you got questions.
We got a few minutes left. So come on.
A couple minutes left.
Let's do some questions right here in the mix.
I see your names. I even got, there's one picture.
So do we have any questions from the crowd? Don't be shy. Let's give him a minute.
I'm gonna just call in everybody's name. I'll call it
Mm-hmm.
in a second. If you don't want me to mess up, you want me to mess up. This is not a threat. I'm just tired. I'm tired.
And I hear you. But come on, folks. Don't take advantage of this because, I mean, although we could have a sequel, but we'll talk about it.
Man, I'll come back. I've been up since 5 a.m. I got a 3-year-old.
All righty, that's it. But
I'm good.
Yeah. So, because I mean, there's so much to talk about in this, and I probably like imagine this was going to happen. The students are going to have questions, and if you have questions, you can, because I don't want to take up the time because they have class in 20 minutes, so I want to make sure we don't. So I want to honor that.
So you're saying we got 18 minutes? I'm kidding. Everyone's now mad at me. Everyone just logs off. No. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
So we're gonna stop. We're gonna just leave the students the time to pose the questions and send them to you later. So I want to just take a moment to appreciate Mike, to appreciate your presence here today, the conversation, everything that we had. I really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart because I know that you had a lot of stuff to do.
It is my pleasure. And one of the things I will say is when you find in your academic and scholarly and personal travels, when you find your community, support them, run through a wall for them. So So we made it happen. I wanted to make sure I made it happen. I wasn't right. Because real recognize real, as Jay-Z said. And when you see those people and you get when you get together with those folks, make sure that you're supporting them. Your folks are out there. Don't get shook, right? Don't get shook. You got it. You're going to be great. Thank you for having me. I hope that there was at least one of those many sentences that'll be useful for you.
Absolutely, Mike. Absolutely. And I think there's a lot of, there's a lot more ground to cover. So I wanted to express my gratitude. Thanks everybody for being Tatiana, for joining the conversation. And once again, for everybody who will be watching this later on YouTube, remember this is part of the LSLP session webinar series. We invite you to check this video and check out all the videos that we have on topics related to literacy, education, and qualitative research. So once again, everybody, thank you so much and have a wonderful time.
Thank you, everybody.